The courtroom was already tense before a single question landed. As the judges settled in, lawyers moved quickly. Documents were raised, objections started flying, and it became clear this would not be an ordinary session. At the center of it all was the witness everyone was waiting for. INEC's ICT director called to speak on the technology behind the election. And with every exchange, you could feel one question hanging in the air: what was really about to come out? Just as the session was about to move forward, something unexpected happened. Before the witness could even take the stand, INEC's counsel approached the panel with a request. There were documents he said that they wanted to tender before the examination began. It sounded routine at first, until the response from the other side shifted the atmosphere in the room. The lead counsel for the Labour Party stood up and explained that their team also had subpoenas and documents related to the witness. According to him, presenting them would help ensure a seamless proceeding. But the moment he said that, the presiding judge leaned forward and asked a question that instantly changed the tone. "What do you mean by seamless case?" the judge asked. Then came the reminder that echoed across the courtroom. The Labour Party had already closed its case. The judge repeated it carefully, almost as if making sure there was no misunderstanding. If the case had been closed, how could they now be attempting to tender new documents? Was this an attempt to reopen proceedings? Counsel tried to clarify. The documents, he said, were tied to the witness and had been obtained through subpoena. The intention wasn't to reopen the case, but simply to place them before the court for completeness. But the judge was firm. No, the case had already been closed. There would be no reopening. The exchange was brief, but it carried weight. At first glance, it seemed puzzling. Why would experienced lawyers attempt something the court rules clearly discouraged? Why push for documents after officially resting their case? Then the reasons slowly became clearer. What the Labour Party team appeared to be doing wasn't really about reopening the case at all. It was about drawing attention to something else, something that had happened earlier. Those same documents now being introduced by INEC were documents the Labour Party had previously demanded. They had even secured subpoenas for them. Yet at the time, the response had been that the documents were unavailable. Unavailable. And yet here they were, suddenly appearing in court when it suited the other side to present them. So the attempted tender wasn't just about evidence. It was a way of placing that contradiction in plain view. A quiet but deliberate move to highlight what they believed was deception. Whether the strategy would ultimately matter to the judges remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the message had been delivered and everyone in the courtroom had heard it. With the procedural back and forth behind them, attention finally shifted to the witness everyone had been waiting for. INEC's Director of Information and Communication Technology stepped forward to take the stand. His name was Dr. Lawrence Bayode, and almost immediately the questioning began. INEC's counsel started with the basics, guiding the witness through the formal introductions. Yes, the man on the stand confirmed his name was Dr. Lawrence Bayode. He lived in Abuja. He had worked with INEC for a long time, 24 years in fact. Over those years, he had risen through the ranks and now served as deputy director in the ICT department. Then came the document already filed before the tribunal. The lawyer asked if he had made a written statement dated April 10th. Yes, the witness replied. How would the court recognize it? By his signature, he said. Did he wish to adopt it as his testimony? Again, yes. But just as it seemed the process would move smoothly, the witness added something that made a few heads turn. There were some errors, he said, specifically on pages 69 and 70, that he wanted to correct. The court allowed the correction to proceed, and in that moment, a quiet irony hung in the air. Earlier in the proceedings, there had been sharp criticism directed at a Labour Party witness for attempting to make small corrections to a statement. It had been treated as a major issue at the time. Yet here was INEC's own witness calmly requesting amendments to his own document before adopting it. Still, the testimony moved on. INEC's counsel continued questioning Dr. Bayode, steering the discussion toward a particular technical record. In his earlier statement, the lawyer noted the witness had referenced something called a cloud trail log. If he saw that log again, could he identify it? Yes, the witness said. His name and signature were on it. At that point, the lawyer turned to the judges and formally asked that the CloudTrail log and its certification be tendered as evidence. It appeared as item 6 on the schedule of documents before the court. The presiding judge looked up and asked the room the familiar question: "Any objections?" There were none that stopped the process. One of the responding lawyers made a light remark that it might be a bit too early in the morning to begin objecting to documents, drawing a ripple of quiet amusement through the courtroom. The Labour Party counsel noted their objection, but said the full reasons would come later when necessary. With that, the documents were admitted. INEC's lawyer then asked the court for permission to treat the documents as read, rather than going through them line by line. The judge, clearly in a lighter mood for a moment, responded with a joke of his own. How exactly did they plan to demonstrate a document that was in the cloud? Another judge joined in, suggesting that perhaps everyone would have to enter the cloud to see it properly. The brief humor broke the tension for a second. Then the courtroom settled again. The documents were formally accepted into evidence, and the testimony continued. Once INEC's counsel finished, another lawyer rose from his seat to question the witness. This time, it was the lawyer representing Bola Tinubu. His approach was direct, almost methodical, as he began guiding the witness through a line of reasoning centered on one key idea: that the real foundation of the election results was not the online portal people had been talking about, but the physical documents produced at polling units. He started by asking about the official election forms, EC8A and EC8B. These, he suggested, were the authentic records used to establish the results of the election. The witness agreed. According to him, the foundation of the electoral process rests on those physical forms completed at the polling units. Then the lawyer moved a step further. Even if something happened to the images uploaded to the IReV portal, he suggested that would not affect the actual physical results recorded on the EC8A forms. Those forms, after all, were not blurry pieces of data floating somewhere online. They were physical documents filled out, signed, and preserved. The witness again agreed. He seemed ready to expand on that explanation, perhaps to clarify the relationship between the physical forms and the electronic uploads. But the lawyer quickly cut him off. No, he said, signaling that he wanted to move on. The questioning continued in the same direction. The lawyer suggested that the images of EC8A forms uploaded to the IReV portal were not the documents actually used for the final collation of results. The witness once again confirmed that the physical forms were what mattered in the official computation. Then, unexpectedly, the lawyer introduced a comparison that seemed to catch some people off guard. He asked whether the witness was aware of the INEC project introduced during the Buhari administration. Yes, the witness said he was aware of it. The lawyer then suggested that the INEC had faced technological problems and struggled to function properly. The witness agreed again. In fact, the lawyer went further, suggesting that the system had encountered technical impediments even after its launch. Once more, the witness nodded in agreement. Listening to this exchange, you could almost feel the confusion building. The comparison raised an obvious question. What exactly did the INEC have to do with uploading election results? Because when you really think about it, the two systems are completely different. Uploading an image to a server is something people do every single day. Photos go up to social media platforms constantly, Instagram, Facebook, cloud storage services, without anyone treating it like a technological miracle. In fact, that simplicity was precisely why INEC had relied on Amazon Web Services for its infrastructure. And there was another point that made the comparison even stranger. INEC had previously explained that when results were captured in areas without network coverage, the devices would store them and automatically upload the images once they reached a place with connectivity. So, if that was the design all along, what exactly had changed on election day? Still, the lawyer pressed on, reinforcing the argument that the election process effectively concludes at the polling unit. Once the presiding officer counts the votes, records them on the EC8A form, signs the document, and captures an image with the BVAS device, the essential result is already determined. The witness agreed again, and with that, the line of questioning came to a close. As the questioning continued, attention shifted back to the technical records that had just been admitted into evidence, the awscloud trail logs. The lawyer directed the witness to explain exactly what the court was looking at. These logs, the witness said, came from INEC's account, on Amazon Web Services. They recorded activity related to the election transmission system, particularly changes made to the application running on the cloud. According to the witness, the entries showed patches that were deployed to the e-transmission application on election day. Those patches, he explained, were introduced to address glitches that had been encountered on the system. The explanation sounded straightforward on the surface. A system experiences issues, engineers deploy patches, and the logs record the activity. But once you pause and think about it, the word patch can mean many different things in the world of software. A patch might fix a serious malfunction, but it can also be a routine update. Sometimes it adjusts performance, sometimes it strengthens security, and sometimes it simply prepares the system for future improvements. In other words, the presence of a patch alone doesn't automatically mean the system was down or incapable of performing its task. And that's where another piece of testimony becomes important. Earlier in the proceedings, staff from Amazon Web Services themselves had been called to testify. Their position was clear from what they observed on their end. There was no glitch in the AWS infrastructure on the day of the election that would have prevented the upload of results. So now the courtroom was faced with two things sitting side by side. On one hand, cloud trail logs showing patches being deployed to the e-transmission application. On the other hand, testimony from AWS personnel stating that they saw no system failure that could have blocked uploads, which raises a natural question. If the infrastructure itself had no issue preventing uploads, what exactly were these patches addressing? Were they routine updates, minor adjustments? Something else entirely. The witness had described them simply as fixes for glitches encountered on the application. But beyond that, the details remained somewhat unclear, and in a case where the reliability of electronic result transmission sits at the center of the dispute, even small technical details suddenly carry a lot of weight. For now, the explanation stood as part of the record. The cloud trail logs were in evidence the patches had been acknowledged, and the courtroom moved on knowing the real test of these claims would come during cross-examination. Then came the moment many people in the courtroom had been waiting for. The Labour Party legal team rose for cross-examination. The tone shifted immediately. Up until now, the witness had mostly been agreeing with suggestions from the other side, but this phase was different. Now the questions were sharper, slower, and clearly designed to test the technical claims that had been presented. The lawyer began with the e-transmission application itself. He suggested to the witness that the system used for transmitting election results had been tested before the election. The witness agreed that testing had indeed been carried out. But the lawyer pressed further. According to him, the testing had taken place between the 3rd and the 6th of February 2023. The witness corrected that almost immediately. No, he said the testing was done specifically on the 4th of February, 2023. The lawyer leaned in. Was there a report documenting that test? Yes, the witness replied. There was. At that point, the Labour Party counsel walked closer to the witness and presented a document. It was the very report being referenced produced earlier through subpoena. The witness confirmed what it was, a security and vulnerability assessment report connected to the e-transmission system. Before the witness could elaborate much further, the lawyer moved quickly to tender the document as evidence. There were no objections from the other parties, and the report was admitted. Now the questioning became more specific. The lawyer directed the witness to a particular part of the report, paragraph 7. In that section, he pointed out the assessment identified vulnerabilities in the server that had been tested. The witness acknowledged that the vulnerability had been recorded there. Then came a brief moment that caught the room slightly off guard. The lawyer asked the witness if he was also a senior pastor in a church. The witness confirmed that he was. It was an unusual detour, but the questioning quickly returned to the technical details. The lawyer again referenced paragraph 7, where the report had rated the risk level of the server as high. The witness did not dispute that the report contained that rating, but he added something important: the issue, he said, had already been resolved. The lawyer did not let the point pass easily. If the system had once been that vulnerable, he suggested there would have been a possibility of manipulation. The witness rejected that idea. According to him, after the tests and the remediation steps taken following February 4th, the system was no longer vulnerable. Then the discussion moved to another technical detail. The lawyer asked whether the testing had been conducted on the actual production server used for the election. No, the witness clarified. The testing had been performed on the UAT server, the user acceptance testing environment. The lawyer pointed to a page in the report and asked the witness to look at the server reference listed there. After examining it, the witness confirmed that it referred to the pre-production environment used for testing. With that established, the lawyer shifted to another area entirely the structure of awscloud trail logs. He listed several features typically recorded in those logs: event time, event source, event name, AWS region source IP address, and identity access management information. Did the witness agree that these were part of the log records? Yes, the witness said. Those details were indeed captured. By this point, the courtroom had settled into a quiet rhythm. Question, pause, answer. Each step slowly building a technical picture of how the system had been tested, monitored, and recorded. But it was clear the cross-examination was not finished yet. Then came one of those moments that makes an entire courtroom pause. The Labour Party lawyer stepped closer to the witness with another document in hand. This one, he explained, had been downloaded directly from the IReV portal and certified by INEC itself. He placed it before the witness and asked a very simple question. What were the APC scores on that document? The witness looked down at the page. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he replied that the document was blurry. The lawyer repeated the question, this time more carefully. As the director of ICT for INEC, could he read the scores recorded for APC on the form displayed there? Again, the witness struggled with it. The image, he said, was unclear. By this point, the presiding judge leaned forward, clearly trying to move things along. He asked the witness directly whether the document showed the APC score. The answer came back almost the same. It was blurry, the witness said, difficult to read. And yet he added something else. Even though the image was blurry, he insisted it did not affect the results. That statement hung in the air for a moment, because earlier in the testimony, the witness had already made a very clear point. When results are uploaded to the IReV portal, the image itself does not alter the content of the original document. The uploaded image is simply a representation of the same physical form that exists at the polling unit. In other words, whatever appears on the image should match what is written on the physical EC8A form. So now the room was left with an uncomfortable question. If the document used to display those results online is so blurry that even INEC's own ICT director cannot read the numbers, how exactly were those results verified when they were announced? The lawyer didn't need to say it out loud. The implication was already there. And people in the courtroom clearly felt it too. A ripple of laughter spread through the room, not the kind that comes from humor, but the kind that bursts out when something suddenly seems impossible to ignore. The presiding judge quickly called for order, reminding everyone that the proceedings had to remain serious. But the moment had already landed, because the witness had just acknowledged two things at the same time. First, that the uploaded image does not change the original document. And second, that the image in front of him downloaded from the same portal was too blurry for him to read. Which leads to the question many people watching the exchange were probably asking themselves. If the numbers cannot be clearly read from the uploaded record, how did those same numbers become the basis for declaring the final result? The courtroom moved forward after that, but the tension in the air had clearly shifted. As the session wrapped up, INEC's defense ultimately rested on the testimony of that single witness. A brief re-examination followed where he explained the difference between functionality tests, performance tests, and vulnerability tests. Technical distinctions meant to clarify how the system was evaluated. And with that, the day's proceedings came to an end. The tribunal adjourned, leaving the final judgment in the hands of the judges. If you've been following these developments closely, stay with the updates ahead, and feel free to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.